Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing one of the bigger matchups of this first round between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Besides my favorite team in the Stars in their series against the Flames, this might be the series I'm most interested to watch. So many storylines and so much going into it. But when it comes to this Bolts and Leafs matchup, which team do I think will win this series? What are each team's strengths and weaknesses? What can we expect from both the Leafs and Tampa? And which team will advance on to round 2? Watch till the end for all my predictions, and make sure you hit that subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get into preview of this insane and awesome matchup. Now, one of the most interesting parts about this series to me is the difference between these two teams while also being pretty similar in the standings, especially when it comes to the situation. With Tampa Bay, there is almost no pressure for them. Yes, they did trade for Brendan Hagel, and there was a huge haul going back to Chicago, but if they lose in the first round, they still got 2 back-to-back Stanley Cups. They'll be just fine. Meanwhile, for the Toronto Maple Leafs, we know that if they lose in the first round of this series, there could be some massive shakeups, and we could see even players as big as William Nylander potentially gone this offseason. So really, it feels like all the pressure is on Toronto to match up to Tampa Bay. But at the same time, looking at it right now, even on paper, maybe you'd want Florida or maybe Boston or Washington. I think for Toronto, their best playoff matchup was the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Sheldon Keefe said it best when he was talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning and their threat in the first round. The harder, the better. That's what we need. And I perfectly agree with that. I think for this Leafs team, they get over the hump, and it's against this Tampa team that proves what they can finally do. But for one, they're seeing what they could be and should be. And I think for this Toronto team, that is especially important. Now, one lesson I think the Tampa Bay Lightning desperately needed to learn and did learn in the 2019 series versus Columbus was that the NHL is not fair, and especially the NHL playoffs are not fair. This was a Tampa team that won the President's Trophy, was going up against a Columbus team, and would eventually get swept. And then we saw them grind it out and really put in the work in 2020, and then win back-to-back Stanley Cups in 2021. My main question is, has Toronto also learned that lesson? They should have learned that lesson in 2021 with that Montreal series, but this series truly is going to be the big test. Has Toronto learned their lessons, and have they truly executed on those? Because in my opinion, this is the perfect demon to slay. If they have truly taken that next step, we will see it against Tampa Bay, and if they do get to the second round, all those demons have been flushed. But that's just the question. Will the Leafs actually have enough to get past Tampa Bay? And looking at the rosters, looking at how both of these teams have played throughout the course of the season, that answer is extremely complicated. But starting off with the top sixes for both of these teams, there's a pretty big difference, especially with the Leafs and their spread of offense. Obviously, you got Austin Matthews first place with 106 points in 73 games. You got Marner with 97, Nylander with 80, and the Leafs in general have 7 players over 50 points. For the Bolts, it's definitely lesser so, but they still got their top end guys, with Stammer also having 106 points of his own. You also got Victor Hedman as a D-man with 85 points on the year, extremely underrated. You also got Alex Killorn, Kucherov, Point in that conversation, Andre Palat. But although Toronto's bottom 6 is definitely better offensively, in my opinion, Tampa's bottom 6 and even their second line is built and stacked for the playoffs. You got so many players like Corey Perry, who has 40 points this season, by the way. You got Ross Colton, you got Pat Maroon, Bellemare, you got Nick Paul, you got Brandon Hagel. So many players that are going to make life so extremely difficult for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's what they're designed to do. And that's what's given Tampa that major playoff success over these past couple of years. Now, Toronto's bottom 6 definitely has improved, but looking at Tampa's, the top 6 is pretty close when you compare the two teams, but the bottom 6 is much better for Tampa when we get into playoff time in the NHL. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting in the defense. If I ask you right now who has the better defense in Tampa or Toronto, you probably say the Bolts, and I definitely agree come playoff time, with Victor Hedman easily being the best defenseman out of both of these teams, and I still think being a top 3 defenseman way better than anything Toronto has to offer. At the same time, I think they have a solid group of D-men. For Tampa Bay, they have Hedman, Sergachev, McDonough, Ruda, Chernak, Foote, and Bogosian all in the mix. But for Toronto, they have a wealth of options. Obviously, you got Riley, Brody, Timothy Liljegren, who's taking that next step, Justin Hall, Rasmus Sandin, Jake Muzzin, Mark Giordano. A lot of top 6 caliber D-men there, and especially with the rise of Liljegren and Sandin this year, it's given that defense a much needed depth element that they didn't quite have haven't, especially that youthful element as well. Although Toronto's defense isn't nearly as experienced as Tampa Bay's, at the same time I could still see them holding their own just like they did in last year's playoffs versus the Montreal Canadiens. But this next part I think is where the biggest difference might be in favor of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that is the goaltending. If I gave you a choice between who you'd rather take in the playoffs, Andre Vasilevskiy or Jack Campbell, you should be saying Andre Vasilevskiy every day of the week because he's earned that respect for very good reasons. This year though, in 63 games, Vasilevskiy has a .916 save percentage. Contrast that with Campbell's 49 games where he has a .914. In the regular season, these two goaltenders aren't too different, and especially with Jack Campbell, he's been very good over these last 5 games. But even though he was good in the playoffs last year versus Montreal, I think the playoffs is just where the biggest discrepancy and difference happens when it comes to the Leafs goaltending and the confidence there, and also Tampa Bay's. For a lot of these last couple of years, a lot of the playoff success has come from not just Vasilevskiy's play, but the confidence he gives the rest of that Tampa team. When your goaltender is so hot and so collected, it just gives the rest of your team a different aura. For Toronto, even if Jack Campbell has been great, there's also been moments where there's been some worries, some health issues throughout this year, and that's also plagued their tandem a little bit this season. But when we look at the playoffs over these past couple of years of Vasilevskiy, in 2020 he had a .927 save percentage in 25 games, and last year in 2021, in 23 games, had a .937 save percentage. You simply can't get much better than that, and in my opinion, come playoff time, Vasilevskiy will be the better goaltender. He always seems to find a way, especially over these past couple of years. And that's just the thing. In the regular season, I might prefer Toronto's forward group. I might prefer some components of that defense, but once you get to the playoffs, everything changes, and there's no team that exemplifies that most than Toronto and their great regular seasons and eventual playoff defeats. In my opinion, looking at Tampa and just the complete roster they've assembled, one, that forward group is going to be just HE double hockey sticks to play against every single shift, and that defense is still at a supreme level, while Andre Vasilevskiy, I think, will be right at home. In my opinion, yes, the home ice advantage might be a factor in this series. I don't think it's going to sway Tampa Bay too much since they've been so good on the road over these past couple years in the playoffs. Looking at both of these teams right now, I'm going to say this series goes all the way to 7 games, but Tampa Bay wins this series in the end. I think it'll be extremely close. I think it'll be a fantastic one, but just getting over the hump, that'll be the true test for this Leafs team. But I still think Tampa, with the experience they have and the consistency they have, will show up in the big moments. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Comment down below what you guys agree and disagree with my predictions, and what do you guys see happening in this playoff series. Do you see Tampa winning, Toronto winning? How many games do you see it going to? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Make sure you share this video with your friends. Get it out there to any hockey fans, Leafs, Bolts fans you guys know online. I will see you guys in the next one, though. Have a great day. Drink some water, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.